Detectives are currently rolling out cutting-edge tech and scrubbing fresh clues, praying for that one massive break to finally find Nancy. Authorities are deploying specialized tracking gear called a signal sniffer, desperate to catch a ping from the 84-year-old's medical implant. Buried deep inside Nancy Guthrie's chest sits a tiny machine that captured it all. Each pulse, sudden shift, panic spike, and biological reaction she endured during the exact evening she vanished into thin air. Everything is locked away with digital stamps inside that embedded chest monitor, a gadget the FBI has been desperately struggling to hack and decipher ever since the first week of February. The horrifying truths hidden inside those digital logs are exactly why we made this video, since the general public completely misunderstands how modern pacemakers actually work. These gadgets do way more than just regulate rhythms or deliver electric shocks to keep your pulse steady. Today's cardiac implants are essentially full-blown data vaults. They record stamp times, monitor vitals, and connect remotely to paired electronics, leaving behind digital breadcrumbs that experts can use to build an exact timeline far better than any camera or eyewitness could ever dream of matching. And Nancy Guthrie happens to have one of these incredibly precise digital trackers buried right inside her chest. Federal agents have spent 68 straight days battling to crack the internal logs from the night of February 1st, so welcome to Crime View, where we are diving further into this cardiac evidence than anyone else out there. We will explore exactly what these implants track and precisely how the Bureau's specialized medical forensics team handles this crucial biological information. We are unpacking what her specific logs say regarding that 41-minute gap between 1:47 and 2:28 a.m., plus what the government's hacking efforts finally exposed about Nancy Guthrie's fate during that critical window. You have waited 68 long days for these answers, so stick around until the very end. And if you are not already following Crime View, now is the absolute best time to hit that subscribe button. Make sure your alerts are on because the details we are about to unpack represent the single most important and scientifically complex breakthrough this case has seen so far. The public had this totally wrong from day one. So before we review the files, I have to debunk a massive rumor that almost every news outlet has badly botched or dumbed down since early February. This correction is incredibly crucial because if your basic facts are flawed, you will completely miss the true horror of what federal investigators just uncovered. Early on, the popular theory claimed her implant stopped updating at 2:28 a.m., leading everyone to assume that was the exact moment tragedy struck and the kidnapping occurred. People wrongly believe that kicked off the 41-minute gap. But grasping why that timeline is totally false is your master key to decoding what the biological logs truly expose. When journalists claimed the syncing crashed at 2:28, they were merely talking about the exact second the internal monitor lost contact with its linked external base station. That base was probably a nightstand hub or a phone application Nancy utilized for health tracking, but that dropped connection absolutely does not mean the chest piece broke down. It definitely does not imply her pulse flatlined. It simply proves the Bluetooth link between the internal unit and her external hub was severed, which can happen for multiple reasons. The receiving hub might have been relocated too far away, or the biological implant traveled past the signal limit, strongly suggesting the victim herself was physically dragged away. Perhaps the external hub got switched off and destroyed, or some heavy barrier blocked the transmission entirely, yet that brings us to the most vital clue of all. The machine itself never stopped gathering data internally, meaning long after the 2:28 disconnection, that little gadget kept doing its job by tirelessly logging and timestamping everything. It secretly hoarded data on every irregular beat. Biological shock major physical shift and wild fluctuation where her pulse skyrocketed or crashed beyond standard medical limits. Federal agents have been killing themselves to crack that private cache, and pulling those files is a nightmare, far more complicated than just jamming a USB cord into a laptop. Reading these high-tech medical implants demands highly restricted corporate software to bypass the security alongside serious doctor-level knowledge just to understand what the numbers actually mean. Plus, when dealing with criminal evidence, investigators must maintain an unbreakable chain of custody to ensure every single retrieved file holds up perfectly in a courtroom. The Bureau isn't just relying on standard computer geeks for this job. They brought in specialized medical detectives, top-tier heart hardware experts, and corporate contacts specifically preparing for scenarios where the tech company refuses to hand over the required data codes willingly. They are armed with massive legal hammers, like federal subpoenas, to force compliance, and this intense battle has been raging behind the scenes for 68 days. The terrifying narrative spilling out of those digital files is far darker and incredibly more vivid than the public suspects, especially regarding those missing 41 minutes. Allow me to break down exactly what our initial timeline looked like regarding that 41-minute void right before the medical implant finally gave up its secrets. The shocking difference between our old assumptions and the cold, hard biological facts is absolutely staggering. Her porch camera was permanently killed at 1:47 a.m., a fact proven by remote Google Nest servers that successfully dodged the attacker's frantic sabotage attempts. A disguised intruder hauling a rucksack and a gun walked right up and smashed the lens at 147, which is verified undeniable video evidence. Her internal chest unit dropped its wireless link at 2:28 a.m., exactly 41 minutes after the blackout, leaving detectives haunted by one massive lingering question. What kind of nightmare unfolded during those 41 minutes between the 147 camera death and the 2:28 signal drop, a span of total surveillance blackout? 0 security clips, a discarded cell phone, absolutely no car tracking metrics, and silent neighbors left police with 41 minutes of pure static until they checked the heart implant. That medical device stayed wide awake for all 41 of those crucial minutes, silently filing away every single biological reaction her body had to the absolute terror unfolding around her. Once the federal medical experts finally hacked into that private vault, the 41-minute timeline they uncovered mapped out a horror story that normal detective work could never reveal. Let's explore the actual science of medical forensics, because the public wrongly assumes grabbing this data is as easy as dragging a PDF to your desktop, and that is completely false. It is absurdly complex and grasping. This science explains exactly why the lab needed weeks to extract the files and why these clues will completely dominate in court. Advanced biological implants. The official scientific classification for these medical regulators hoard their vast amounts of patient info inside highly guarded digital memory vaults. Those hidden files maintain a pristine record of every single biological anomaly the machine witnesses and attempts to fix. Every single artificial shock it pumps out gets written down, and the exact second it spots an irregular flutter, it stamps that moment forever. Your heart keeps secrets, but this tiny machine permanently records every single terrifying spike or dangerous drop. These implants permanently etch every major bodily shift into their internal storage with pinpoint accuracy, capturing a truly mind-blowing level of biological detail. Medical tech companies originally built these tracking features to help doctors trace long-term changes in a person's cardiovascular well-being over several years. Hospitals rely on these metrics to tweak prescriptions, fine-tune the physical hardware, and spot dangerous rhythms before they become fatal. But when detectives get involved, those exact same medical files turn into a biological clock that directly maps out a violent crime scene. Extracting that digital footprint from a missing or uncooperative victim forces federal agents to choose from several distinct extraction tactics. The absolute simplest path usually involves partnering right up with the specialized law enforcement departments at the medical company itself. Industry giants like Medtronic Abbott and Boston Scientific all maintain strict official guidelines for handing over patient vitals to authorities during active criminal probes. Tech experts use exclusive programming tools to hack into the implant over a wireless connection and drain every single byte of stored memory. Doctors easily handle this while you rest peacefully on a clinic bed, but a murder investigation makes things infinitely trickier. Having the victim right there means the transfer wraps up in seconds, whereas a missing body forces detectives to get incredibly creative. That exact hurdle drives this entire mystery because Nancy vanished without a trace, taking her internal hardware completely off the grid with her. Federal agents obviously cannot invite a missing woman down to the station for a diagnostic scan, so they leaned heavily on the digital breadcrumbs left behind. Those specific breadcrumbs consisted of the health metrics backed up to her bedside hub right before the connection abruptly died at 2:28. Everything logged before that sudden drop-off stayed securely locked inside her home station and beamed straight up to the corporate cloud network. Detectives immediately zeroed in on those remote servers, ultimately uncovering their biggest breakthrough from the digital echoes that actually survived the blackout. Almost every news outlet completely missed a crucial technical detail. Here today's cardiac implants communicate with much more than just a nearby phone. Countless modern versions silently stream a constant feed of vitals up to corporate servers using a basic hub plugged directly into a standard wall outlet. Nancy Guthrie actually utilized this exact setup, keeping a bedroom terminal that fired her continuous pulse readings into the remote database with almost zero delay. Because of this technology, the sudden Bluetooth crash at 2:28 hardly mattered, since a massive archive of her previous heart rhythms already existed securely online. Severing the local connection never wipes those remote files, leaving them permanently frozen in time for anyone who knows exactly where to look. Federal investigators legally demanded full access to those hidden server logs during the initial 7 days of their massive search. The tech company happily handed everything over, sparking a deep medical dive that quickly exposed the most damning evidence of the entire mystery. We must carefully separate verified agency statements from leaked journalistic rumors right now, simply because authorities absolutely refuse to discuss these heartbeat metrics publicly. Federal silence is standard operating procedure, meaning our current understanding stems primarily from subtle hints deliberately dropped during official police press briefings. We also rely heavily on brilliant retired agents and veteran medical examiners who thoroughly dissected the available clues to form their own expert conclusions. Our final pipeline of truth flows from relentless investigative journalists digging up confidential details straight from heavily guarded inside sources. Blending those three distinct perspectives together paints a remarkably vivid portrait that we are about to rigorously explore step by step. This is the true biological sequence of events directly translating what her actual pulse recorded. Allow me to break down the exact bodily chronology that federal technicians pulled straight out of the victim's recovered internal hardware. We need to dissect this highly sensitive timeline second by second since every single fluctuation reveals a totally unique chapter of the nightmare. January 31st kicked off without a hitch as Nancy enjoyed a completely quiet family dinner over at her daughter Annie and son-in-law Tommaso's place. Her pulse hovered at a perfectly healthy resting rhythm for an older woman, showing absolutely zero stress markers, while she relaxed with her loved ones. Tommaso drove her back to her house around 9:50 that night, and her vitals remained flawlessly steady throughout the entire 15 to 20-minute ride. She pulled into her driveway and securely shut the garage at 10:10, which is exactly when the medical logs capture something strange. Roughly 45 minutes to a full hour after stepping inside somewhere between 10:50 and 11:30, her previously calm pulse suddenly spiked far beyond its comfortable resting pace. It was definitely not a full-blown panic attack, just a distinct cardiovascular surge that lingered for a couple of minutes before eventually settling back down. Medical examiners studying these specific digital ripples universally agree that the blip perfectly mirrors a classic biological adrenaline rush. You usually spot this exact type of quick physiological jump when a person gets startled by a strange sound or suddenly senses a hidden threat. Granted, that single surge hardly proves murder, considering a scary movie. A barking neighborhood dog or just fetching late-night water triggers the exact same reaction. Yet the machine permanently logged that exact moment anyway, kicking off a biological countdown that spirals into pure terror just a few hours later. From 11:30 until nearly 1:30 the following morning, her bodily rhythms flattened out into a deeply relaxed and perfectly stable state. Specialists analyzing the charts confidently identify this phase as normal slumber, even if they cannot officially classify it as the absolute deepest level of unconsciousness. Everything ticked along slowly and smoothly without a single hiccup, right up until the metrics went absolutely haywire, somewhere between 140 and 150. At the exact same second, a heavily disguised prowler was caught slashing her porch security wires. Nancy's internal chest monitor exploded with a massive physiological trauma alert. Imagine waking up to a living nightmare. Her pulse absolutely skyrocketed in a fraction of a second. This massive violent spike perfectly mirrors pure panic, matching the exact physical shock someone feels when a home invader jolts them from sleep. Her internal medical device captured every single beat with ruthless accuracy. That terrifying heartbeat spike aligns flawlessly with the exact moment the security feed went black at 1:47 in the morning. You simply cannot write this off as random chance. We are looking at cold hard biological proof of Nancy's utter terror the instant her kidnappers struck, unlocking the secrets hidden inside those crucial 41 minutes. This brings us straight into that dreaded 41-minute gap, bridging the darkness at 1:47 and the final transmission at 2:28. Detectives have obsessed over this exact time frame since day one. The rhythmic clues captured during those 41 minutes represent the ultimate holy grail of evidence for this mystery, so we need to break it down step by step. That initial adrenaline surge at 1:47 didn't just fade away. Her pulse actually raced at a breakneck speed for quite a while. Medical experts reviewing these charts insist this layout perfectly mirrors relentless, agonizing panic. It essentially paints a picture of someone terrified and trapped in an endless nightmare. It reflects the exact biological turmoil of a victim facing a continuous threat, getting tied down or being dragged away by force. This was definitely not a quick flutter where the pulse jumps from a sudden noise and smoothly calms back down to a relaxed everyday rhythm. Instead, we see her chest pounding relentlessly for minutes on end, proving to detectives that the 1:47 ambush was not a fleeting scare, but a drawn out terrifying ordeal. Throughout those 41 minutes, the records reveal several clearly defined stages. The initial chapter, covering about 15 minutes after the lens went blind, highlights that prolonged racing pulse, accompanied by wildly erratic skips. These sporadic beats matter tremendously because her internal monitor officially classified them as arrhythmic episodes. While these fluctuations were not medically fatal, doctors immediately recognized this specific chaotic pattern as a symptom of overwhelming psychological agony. Moving into the second act, around 15 or 20 minutes deep, the metrics shift into what medical sleuths classify as motion-induced pulse adjustments. Today's implants pack smart sensors that gauge physical activity to modify heartbeats, meaning they flawlessly track if a person is in motion, the intensity of that action, and even the basic style of their travel. If a victim is being hauled around or driven away, their internal hardware generates vastly different motion signals compared to a person strolling freely or resting comfortably in bed. During this segment of the 41 minutes, the tracking files point squarely to helpless transit, completely ruling out the idea of Nancy strolling through her own home. Those motion metrics strongly imply that someone else was physically hauling, lifting, or driving her away. Then comes the third stage spanning the last 10 to 15 minutes before the 2:28 blackout, revealing a pulse layout acting as the absolute smoking gun of this entire digital profile. Her previously hammering chest from the earlier part of those 41 minutes suddenly displays a unique flutter reduction, a hallmark trait doctors link directly to tranquilizers or a total blackout. She didn't flatline, and she certainly didn't die. Her pulse kept marching on and the implant stayed awake, yet that organic, unpredictable rhythm naturally found in a fully alert human rapidly began fading away. Seeing this drop in rhythmic diversity paints a massive medical red flag. It is the exact blueprint a cardiovascular system creates when the brain's standard control over the body gets severely muted. It happens when a victim is heavily drugged, knocked out, or dosed with mind-altering chemicals right before the final upload at 2:28. After that very second, the online servers received absolute silence. The gadget kept storing files past 2:28, but those precious logs remain locked away inside Nancy's chest, waiting to be retrieved whenever we locate her. Here is what this biology reveals about the kidnapping itself. Unpacking this cardiovascular journey hands detectives an unbelievable asset they rarely ever see in kidnappings. We now have a biological minute-by-minute replay of the actual snatching. Forget unreliable bystanders, neighborhood gossip, or wild guesses. This is a purely scientific timeline, forged by the literal beating of her own chest. Let me break down what this timeline proves. Nancy was wide awake the moment her nightmare began. That sheer panic recorded at 1:47 belongs exclusively to a fully alert individual getting caught completely off guard. You simply do not see these metrics from a sleeping victim who gets dragged out of bed completely oblivious. She knew exactly what was going down during the opening moments of those 41 minutes. Her relentlessly pounding chest and skipping beats across the initial 15 to 20 minutes proved she was trapped in a continuously terrifying scenario. Nobody soothed her, nor was she drugged immediately. She spent a massive chunk of time completely consumed by raw, agonizing dread. Looking at those internal motion sensors, it becomes obvious that halfway through those 41 minutes, she lost the ability to navigate under her own free will. Someone else was moving her, perfectly backing up the idea that attackers shoved her into a getaway ride somewhere inside that 41-minute gap prior to the 2:28 disconnect. Finally, that plunging rhythmic variance captured in the concluding 10 to 15 minutes before the upload vanish points to a grim reality that authorities have deliberately tiptoed around during press briefings. It reveals that by the time the connection severed, Nancy's bodily functions had drastically transformed compared to how she felt at the start of the ordeal. Translating the medical meaning of that concluding chapter represents the most explosive piece of evidence we have, explaining exactly why detectives have kept their mouths firmly shut about it. Now let's aggressively tackle the drugging rumors and police theories head on, mainly because these dark whispers have haunted the case for weeks, and the public finally deserves some undeniable transparency. Those cardiovascular logs, captured near the end of the 41-minute gap, strongly point toward a chemically induced blackout. That is just fancy doctor talk for attackers using heavy narcotics to forcibly manipulate her awareness. They forced a substance into her system either through a needle, a gas, or a pill that successfully dragged her under right before the broadcast ended. This specific revelation completely flips the entire detective timeline upside down. For starters, it proves her kidnappers showed up entirely ready for a fight. Nobody randomly carries hardcore tranquilizers in their pockets by mistake. You hunt for them, pack them, and use them purposely. Assuming doctors read the telemetry right involving chemical knockouts in this snatching proves the assailants carefully bake medical weaponry straight into their twisted battle plan. Forget crimes of opportunity. This represents a chillingly calculated, highly advanced, and masterfully executed professional kidnapping operation. Here is the real bombshell regarding her physical state when the connection dropped. Nancy was absolutely still breathing at 2:28 that night. Those heart rhythms point directly to heavy tranquilizers, completely ruling out a fatal event. Her pulse remained steady while the implant did its job perfectly. These readings paint a clear picture of an individual knocked out cold, yet entirely breathing. Additionally, this hands the detectives a massive clue about what physical traces to hunt down. Knocking a victim out usually leaves behind tangible clues at the primary location. We are talking about needle punctures, discarded medical equipment, lingering smells, or pharmaceutical residue. Lab technicians analyzing biological swabs from the house might pinpoint exactly what drug was utilized, which immediately shrinks the suspect list down to individuals possessing medical clearance to acquire it. Point 4 is arguably the biggest game changer for where this case is heading, because the knockout drug matching this specific heart rhythm carries a highly unique signature. You cannot just grab this stuff off the shelf at a local drugstore. Drugs capable of dropping a person this fast while leaving this exact telemetry footprint are strictly regulated narcotics. We are dealing with clinical-grade narcotics that always generate a massive paper trail, Whether through doctors, orders, hospital inventories, or restricted dispensary logs, whoever secured the chemical agent used against Nancy Guthrie that evening certainly did not pick it up during a grocery run. Federal agents are well aware of this reality. Tracking those acquisition records is currently serving as their strongest lead to crack this mystery. So what about global positioning capabilities? Can her heart monitor reveal her exact route? Everyone watching has probably been wondering about this exact detail from the very start of our discussion. Could the implant memory banks pinpoint Nancy's kidnapped location? Well, the reality is quite complicated. My goal here is to deliver straight facts instead of hyping up unrealistic Hollywood tropes. Contemporary cardiac implants simply lack internal global positioning hardware. You cannot track them like a smartphone or a modern vehicle dashboard unit. These medical tools are entirely incapable of broadcasting live map coordinates. Their sole purpose revolves around capturing bodily functions rather than mapping out travel routes. That being said, the internal motion sensors logging the victim's physical shifts can actually reveal fascinating clues regarding the specific kind of motion she was subjected to. This includes how long she was kept in motion, the distinct sway of a moving car, and the unique tremors caused by driving over various road surfaces. Experts have successfully analyzed motion logs from chest implants in a handful of prior criminal trials to reconstruct a victim's bodily movements. Again, it is not a satellite tracker. It will never print out a clean route, but it remains hard digital evidence. When analyzed by true professionals, these logs drastically narrow down both the potential drop zones and the total drive time. Telemetry logs indicate a continuous state of motion kicking off right halfway through that crucial 41-minute time frame. Just like I mentioned before, the length and style of these shifts registered by the motion sensors clearly point to an automobile ride, entirely ruling out walking or being pulled across a floor. Everything points perfectly to a body being loaded into a car and driven away. These motion signatures kept registering right up until the digital handshake failed at 2:28. Right then, exactly 41 minutes after the lens went dark and the kidnapping started, the getaway car had been moving for roughly 15 to 20 minutes, according to the implant's internal clock. Driving for 15 to 20 minutes away from Nancy's residence in the Catalina foothills aligns perfectly with late-night cruising speeds down those southern Tucson freeways. Based on that time frame, the getaway car was sitting somewhere between 12 and 25 miles away from her house, exactly when the transmission died. This specific circular boundary spanning 12 to 25 miles out from the foothills has completely consumed the mapping division's current efforts. Drawing that exact perimeter over regional charts instantly highlights a few incredibly suspicious travel corridors. The main freeway shooting southwards toward Rio Rico and the international boundary line sits right inside this hot zone. Driving south for 15 to 20 minutes from Nancy's driveway easily lands a car at the upper edge of the exact zone where police launched their February 10th raid. Detectives absolutely realize this is no random fluke. The wireless tracking operation remains in full swing even now. Let us transition into a topic most folks kind of grasp generally, yet completely fail to appreciate regarding its impact on solving this crime. Federal agents are still hunting for Nancy's wireless cardiac broadcast. Current medical implants constantly push out weak radio frequencies whenever a matching scanner gets close enough to listen. The bedside console relies on this exact frequency to pull her vitals and beam them straight into the creator's remote servers. You only get a tiny coverage bubble with this tech, usually maxing out between 15 to 30 feet, depending on the hardware generation and surrounding physical barriers. Almost immediately after Nancy vanished, federal agents rolled out highly classified tech built specifically to sniff out these faint wireless pulses. Think of their gear as an ultra-sensitive listening dish, programmed to recognize the exact digital footprint of her specific implant-letting search teams sweep whole neighborhoods for her exact transmission. On paper, this feels like an incredibly simple fix. Assuming she survived and the battery holds up, just wander the streets holding a scanner until an alert pops up. Easy, right? Well, the reality is a logistical nightmare. That radio bubble is ridiculously small. Searchers basically have to stand within 15 to 30 feet of Nancy's chest just to grab a ping. Throw in any physical obstacles like thick walls, basement dirt, or car doors acting as a shield, and that scanner might stay completely silent even if they are standing right next to her. Finding her relies entirely on cops scanning the exact right neighborhood. Pinpointing that specific block when a victim might be hidden anywhere across a massive desert state feels practically impossible. That is exactly why analyzing the heart monitor's internal memory ties directly into this ongoing wireless hunt. By crunching the motion and pulse logs to lock Nancy's final broadcast between 12 and 25 miles away from her driveway, analysts handed the sweep teams a highly focused grid to check first. Rather than driving around completely blind, agents are zeroing their tech directly on sectors that perfectly match the car's projected path and driving speed. Police squads are actively running radio nets through these targeted zones entirely because of this mathematical breakdown. Authorities are keeping the exact coordinates of these hunting grounds strictly classified. Honestly, keeping that quiet is absolutely smart. The smartest move. Broadcasting their current search grid to the world would immediately tip off her captors, guaranteeing they would smuggle her somewhere else long before cops arrived. Make no mistake, the hunt is very real. Detectives kicked off these sweeps in early February, and those vans are still rolling right now. So what about the tech company that built this gadget, and what secrets are they sitting on? We really need to dive deep into the corporate side of this medical hardware, mostly because the mainstream media has completely ignored this massive angle. Let us cut right to the chase. Nobody outside the investigation knows exactly who manufactured Nancy Guthrie's internal pacemaker. Detectives are deliberately keeping this under tight wraps, mostly because broadcasting the exact hardware tracking abilities and data collection specs would totally compromise their hidden forensic advantage. However, broad media coverage confirms one vital detail: her implant featured remote wireless tracking. That indicates it constantly talked to a stationary console in her residence, pinging vital statistics back to corporate servers on a fixed schedule. Every single top-tier medical brand builds this function into their pacemakers. Federal health regulators actually mandate strict information sharing protocols for American markets, meaning these contemporary tracking networks are incredibly advanced. The leading brands producing surgical heart tech equipped with this elite tier of vital sign surveillance are well documented. These massive healthcare conglomerates operate highly protected digital vaults to stockpile all that sensitive patient telemetry. Every corporation maintains dedicated privacy lawyers specifically tasked with navigating police warrants. They all operate under strict procedural guidelines whenever the government serves them with official court orders. Federal agents secured the legal paperwork for her remote biometric logs right at the beginning of this case. The tech firm handed everything over, allowing cyber experts to construct the precise heart rate chronology we broke down earlier in this video. Yet the hardware company's involvement hardly finishes after dropping off those initial historical files. That exact same digital network holding her preliminary health records actively hunts for any brand new synchronization attempts. Should her chest implant ever drift near a compatible hospital scanner or residential base station, it will register immediately. Grasping this detail is absolutely vital. Should any medical professional attempt an electronic query, or if she simply gets dragged into an emergency room where a technician's scanning tool comes within striking distance to pull records, the system instantly flags it. The tech giant gets an alert right away. Thanks to the active federal wiretaps and standing court orders, that critical ping gets routed straight to the lead detectives. That right there explains why whoever abducted her must keep her far away from doctors, assuming they possess even basic knowledge of how these internal trackers actually operate. The absolute second a hospital wand connects to her chest, authorities get an alarm. Now let us examine how this telemetry completely shreds the rumors of her demise. We need to stack this biometric proof up against that infamous message sent to a gossip outlet claiming she passed away. This raw medical intelligence gives us the perfect lens to thoroughly debunk those morbid allegations. Like we broke down last time on April 6th, which marked day 65 of the manhunt, an unknown source fired off 2 messages to the tabloids. Message 1 declared her deceased. However, that exact same author sent another email that very morning, claiming they spotted her breathing in Sonora, Mexico, prompting veteran federal agents to label the whole stunt a massive hoax. The crypto account tied to their ransom threats saw absolutely zero deposits. Those glaringly opposed stories arriving back to back were a dead giveaway, but wait until you see how her internal heart monitor absolutely buries their narrative. The biological logs from that 41-minute span prove she survived with a perfectly active implant right up until 2:28 on the morning of February 1st. We are looking at continuous, albeit highly stressed, cardiovascular rhythms throughout that entire 41-minute stretch. That digital handshake failed at 2:28 not due to a flatline, but purely because the signal dropped out entirely. This strongly suggests her captors either smashed the bedroom console to pieces or dragged her into a getaway car, driving her out of the receiver's range. Pay close attention here, the telemetry totally rules out a heart attack at 2:28. The hardware never once triggered the fail-safe protocol designed for a deceased patient. Instead, it paints a picture of an active pulse under immense chemical stress, pointing heavily toward forced tranquilization exactly when the Wi-Fi dropped. There is barely any doubt she survived past 2:28 on that February 1st morning. Whatever nightmare unfolded after 2:28 remains locked inside the implant's offline memory banks, just waiting for the police to retrieve it. Naturally, detectives can only pull those hidden files once they locate her physical body. That tabloid email declaring her passing completely clashes with the irrefutable vital signs captured during that final server upload. Now, this hardly guarantees her current safety, considering 68 grueling days have dragged by since that last transmission. Still, it absolutely exposes the tabloid leaker as an outsider who is entirely blind to the actual medical evidence. The hoaxers simply cannot see the private biometrics. They are taking wild shots in the dark, and their lies directly contradict the single most scientific piece of truth detectives have secured, which brings us to the courtroom strategy. How will prosecutors wield this weapon? Let us pivot our focus briefly and dive into the massive legal leverage these electrical heart rhythms offer the district attorney. Grasping its sheer power in front of a jury perfectly explains why federal agents are guarding the chain of custody with such terrifying precision. Heart implant readouts actually have a solid track record of putting criminals behind bars across America. While tapping into internal biology is somewhat fresh in the forensic world, the legal groundwork is already solidly poured. Back in 2018, prosecutors nailed an Ohio guy for torching his property for a payout, heavily relying on implant logs that totally destroyed his alibi for the fire. The biometrics proved he was running around while swearing he was fast asleep in bed. His very own chest practically testified against him. Regarding this specific kidnapping, the downloaded telemetry locks down multiple crucial facts that will absolutely devastate a defense attorney. Number one, the logs undeniably prove she suffered intense bodily trauma throughout that entire 41-minute ordeal. Number two, it delivers a perfectly synchronized biological timeline that practically screams, someone else was in that room violently forcing her away. Number three, assuming lab tests verify the suspected chemical knockout, prosecutors can confidently tack on heavy narcotics distribution charges. That drugging element alone offers the state a massive tactical advantage in the courtroom. Pumping a hostage full of tranquilizers during a snatch and grab automatically triggers severe penalty enhancements under almost every single legal jurisdiction. It screams calculated malice, instantly shrinking the suspect pool since scoring and properly injecting clinical-grade anesthetics demands insider knowledge and leaves a massive paper trail. Any district attorney trying to weaponize this electrical heartbeat evidence must first perfectly authenticate how those files were legally handled. They must summon elite medical specialists to break down the complex biology for everyday jurors, seamlessly tying the invisible pulse rates directly to the bloody crime scene. That exact structural framework is currently being aggressively forged by federal detectives, fierce Arizona state attorneys, and top-tier surgical rhythm analysts who have obsessively picked apart this file for 68 straight days. There is a hidden piece of technology here that the media completely missed. I need to share a massive secret that has flown completely under the radar during the entire press run for this mystery, and honestly, this hidden detail might actually rival the heart implant evidence. Given her medical history and being 84 years old, this missing woman definitely had another piece of smart medical gear strapped to her body when she vanished into thin air. Seniors dealing with heart problems and movement struggles rarely rely solely on their internal implants, as they usually utilize a whole network of supportive tech gadgets. Think about wireless blood pressure cuffs, blood sugar trackers for diabetics, automated fall sensors, emergency distress pendants, or any other remote wellness tools mandated by doctors. If she kept any of those gadgets nearby on that fateful February 1st evening, every single piece of hardware would have automatically captured fresh digital footprints. They create customized timelines of bodily functions alongside wireless connection histories detailing their absolute final sync with an external smartphone or online storage server. Federal agents have kept completely quiet about what other gadgets they discovered inside her residence, refusing to confirm if they pulled extra vitals outside of the main cardiac web portal. Keeping their mouths shut implies two things. Either they found absolutely nothing else, or they secured highly sensitive digital proof and are heavily guarding it for the ongoing criminal probe. Considering her heart problems were severe enough to require continuous medical supervision and a surgically implanted chest unit, plus factoring in the sheer amount of smart medical gear typically utilized by people facing similar health battles. That second theory holds a ton of weight. Finding another digital trail would brilliantly complement the heart rhythm logs by providing extra physical statistics and crucial mobility tracking. That builds an incredibly robust investigative snapshot of those crucial 41 minutes, ultimately handing the district attorneys incredibly potent ammunition whenever they officially bring forth criminal indictments. Federal investigators already know exactly what tech lived inside that residence, seeing as they executed a massive technical sweep during the initial hours of this entire ordeal. Every single smart gadget, synced health tracker, and wireless household item got bagged and tagged, meaning their internal memory banks have fueled this active manhunt for 68 consecutive days. Time is absolutely running out here regarding the hardware's power supply. We urgently need to have a very blunt conversation about the shrinking countdown attached to her cardiac implant. These chest units rely entirely on internal power cells, which generally survive anywhere from 5 to 15 years, based on the specific brand and daily usage rates. However, they eventually die out and cannot simply be plugged into a wall, meaning once that power source drains completely, the patient desperately needs another invasive operation. The missing woman's internal rhythm regulator has been firing nonstop since she vanished exactly 68 days ago. Assuming the hardware had plenty of juice left before she was taken to dead cell is not our primary fear right now. However, if her unit was already nearing its expiration date, things turn incredibly dire, though an even bigger threat looms large right now. Even with a fully charged system, the machine's capacity to properly regulate heartbeats relies heavily on several critical elements outside of mere power levels. Think about the delicate wires attaching the machinery to her actual chest muscle, or how securely the unit sits inside her chest cavity. When someone endures the sheer bodily trauma indicated by her vitals during those brutal 41 minutes, displaced internal wiring becomes a massive medical emergency. Federal agents and their consulting physicians completely recognize how this terrifying and escalating health crisis dramatically amplifies the already stressful criminal manhunt they are running. Rescuing her goes way beyond putting bad guys in handcuffs. We are searching for a highly vulnerable patient suffering alone, relying on unmonitored medical hardware in a completely hostile location. Each sunrise without a rescue means 24 more hours of her implant firing completely blind without any professional doctor's supervision. Furthermore, the federal consulting physicians have stressed that this ticking clock carries devastating biological consequences alongside the obvious legal ones. Why are the cops staying totally mute? Let us quickly dissect exactly why federal authorities are refusing to utter a single word regarding those recovered chest implant logs. Audiences are furious that detectives remain so incredibly secretive about their current hand, and honestly that public anger is entirely justified. 68 entire days have passed without a single federal official stepping up to the press microphones to declare what the implant revealed, what actually occurred during those critical 41 minutes, or what the biometric rhythms prove. However, this frustrating blackout strategy exists for a very simple yet crucial operational reason. Any tiny detail that police broadcast to the media regarding their forensic breakthroughs goes straight into the ears of the exact monsters who abducted this poor woman. Media briefings literally serve as progress reports for the kidnappers, while revealing clues just gives the guilty parties ample time to burn evidence Fleetown or invent airtight alibis for trial. Whenever the main targets remain free on the streets, detectives are still hunting, and the hostage might actually be breathing police departments keep their public relations strategies incredibly locked down. Detectives refuse to reveal their current knowledge, they hide their tracking methods, and they never announce what clues they need or where they are hunting, simply because handing that specific intelligence over to a ruthless criminal could permanently destroy the entire manhunt before it even gets off the ground. Federal agents keeping quiet about the biometric logs hardly means they hit a dead end. Rather, it proves they unearthed something incredibly damning and are fiercely guarding it. Detectives who foolishly leak crucial forensics to the media will never get a redo in court. Bureau agents are absolutely not fumbling this medical intel as they operate with calculated, deliberate, and cunning precision. Furthermore, every single 24-hour period they stay tight-lipped essentially protects the massive tactical upper hand provided by her very own heartbeat. Let us look at historical trials where biometric forensics flipped the script. Allow me to paint a clearer picture using past criminal hunts that utilize similar internal tech, mainly because this specific investigative strategy is certainly not completely new. Looking back at those previous courtroom victories, heavily hints at exactly how these digital logs will ultimately crack this current mystery wide open. That 2018 fire investigation from Ohio that I previously brought up basically revolutionized the usage of biometric evidence within the American justice system. The accused guy swore he was dead asleep when the flames erupted, claiming he barely made it out alive. However, his internal monitor recorded extreme pulse spikes and heavy movement during the blaze, completely ruining his resting story, and proving he was actually working up a major sweat. Those digital files proved he was up and running around at the exact moment he swore he was passed out. A jury found him guilty, not because the internal logs proved a fire happened, since cops already knew that, but because those medical readouts absolutely shattered the suspect's fake alibi. Forget flawed human memories. This swap delivered undeniable biological proof that any jury would immediately believe. When looking at this specific investigation, her heart readings deliver a totally unique, yet incredibly devastating blow to the perpetrators. Detectives cannot tear apart an alibi right now, since authorities haven't officially identified any potential suspects. Instead, this biological readout virtually rebuilds the entire attack from scratch. Those crucial 41 minutes completely missed by neighborhood cameras are finally brought out into the light. Every single physical trauma this elderly victim endured got permanently etched into this digital log. Detectives aren't just guessing if an attack occurred, they are watching the exact sequence of horror play out second by agonizing second. Just track this horrifying biological timeline, starting with that massive spike of sheer terror hitting at exactly 1:47. From there, you notice agonizing levels of panic holding steady throughout the core time frame, directly followed by undeniable physical shifts indicating her body was being moved. Wrap that up with unmistakable signs of chemical incapacitation near the end, and you get a harrowing kidnapping sequence. Frankly, not even a star eyewitness or pristine crime scene could ever match the absolute medical certainty we are seeing right here. Imagine bringing this biological timeline into a courtroom where a brilliant medical expert breaks down the complex readings for everyday people. Having a top-tier heart specialist map out that undeniable bodily trauma for jurors becomes an absolute slam dunk for prosecutors. We are literally watching this victim's own internal organs take the stand to reveal the horrors inflicted upon her. Defense attorneys cannot interrogate a literal pulse rate on the witness stand. Nobody can accuse a machine of holding personal grudges or misremembering crucial details. The unvarnished truth of that night lives within her cardiac implant, and federal agents are analyzing every single beat. But what is the magic bullet that finally cracks this nightmare wide open? Let us get completely real about the current status of this manhunt and the exact hurdles standing in the way of a conviction. Waiting 68 agonizing days without answers feels like an absolute eternity for everyone following along. It is incredibly important that we look at the reality of this manhunt and give you a straight answer on where detectives go from here. Analyzing the victim's internal monitor handed authorities a chilling biological playback of the exact moment she was taken. Additionally, analyzing those exact physical shifts allowed them to drastically shrink their geographic hunting grounds into a highly targeted grid. While those breakthroughs are massive, a graph of heartbeats will never slap handcuffs on a kidnapper all by itself. Law enforcement desperately needs a prime target. They must definitively link a living, breathing perpetrator directly to that horrifying biological timeline. Tying a monster to these internal bodily records is the only way to blow this mystery wide open. And detectives are looking at 4 distinct avenues. Number 1 revolves entirely around tracking down exactly how the attacker got their hands on those heavy, knockout drugs. Assuming the top cardiologists are reading these charts accurately, the perpetrator had to source highly restricted hospital tier chemicals to pull off this snatching. Securing those specific substances means the culprit either knew an insider navigated shady underground internet markets, forged a doctor's order, or simply robbed a clinic blind. Federal agents are currently hunting down every single one of those narcotic supply routes. Keep in mind that wiping your tracks is nearly impossible today, especially with incredibly strict modern pill tracking databases keeping tabs on everything. Avenue number 2 focuses sharply on the digital money angle. That initial $6 million extortion threat specifically listed a virtual currency account for the payoff. Authorities have absolutely locked their eyes onto that ledger, monitoring every single penny that drops. The very second these criminals attempt to transfer those funds or convert them into physical cash, the public ledger permanently logs the transaction. Cyber specialists working the case will instantly flag that activity and track them down. Moving on to the third critical angle, we have the biological trace evidence that police officials briefly touched upon during the chaotic first hours of the search. Everyone knows about the genetic profile pulled from that discarded hand covering, which ultimately turned into a dead end. However, forensic teams actually secured plenty of other vital cellular samples directly from the strike zone. Authorities have remained completely tight-lipped regarding the lab results of those specific bodily fluids. Whenever detectives guard genetic findings with this level of extreme secrecy, you can bet the profile is incredibly solid and fully primed for a courtroom battle. Finally, the fourth pillar relies entirely on word of mouth from the streets. A living person definitely holds the key. Perhaps they caught a glimpse, overheard a drunken brag, or played a minor role, and they have been suffocating under that secret for 68 agonizing days. Harboring a dark truth like this never becomes easier as the weeks drag on. The guilt only crushes you harder. Eventually, individuals break down and spill the beans to an investigator, or they confess to a buddy who ultimately dials the authorities. Do not forget that the victims' relatives are still offering a staggering $1 million payout for actionable leads. Wrestling with a guilty conscience completely alone for 68 consecutive mornings will eventually break even the toughest accomplice. Literally, a single hit on any of these 4 avenues could utterly dismantle this entire mystery before the sun sets today. Federal agents are hyper-aware of these critical pressure points. Dedicated task forces are attacking all 4 angles aggressively at the exact same time. Meanwhile, the heart monitor readouts remain the absolute anchor of this manhunt, serving as the ultimate biological lie detector that every new clue gets tested against. Listen closely, because we desperately need your help if you possess even the tiniest scrap of knowledge regarding the horrific events that span from January 31st into February 1st. If you saw anything out of place in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson, Arizona, you must step forward now. Federal authorities are practically begging for your input right this second. Pick up your phone and dial 1-800-CALL-FBI, which spells out to 1-800-225-5324. Alternatively, you can easily drop an anonymous message at tips.fbi.gov. And remember that massive $1 million family bounty remains fully on the table. Providing verifiable clues that finally bring this beloved matriarch back home will entirely rewrite the ending to this nightmare. It would be an absolute miracle for relatives who have been living in sheer, unadulterated hell for 68 agonizing mornings. We are also putting out a massive call to all healthcare workers and pharmacy staff everywhere. Suppose somebody approached you seeking heavy tranquilizers right around the beginning of February 1st, and that weird interaction left a bad taste in your mouth that simply will not wash away. Detectives need to hear about that specific encounter immediately. Specialized federal divisions focusing entirely on clinic fraud and biological evidence are directly assisting the main task force. They are specifically trained to completely dismantle underground rings that utilize highly restricted prescription narcotics to pull off their crimes. That seemingly insignificant weird moment you brushed off at the clinic might literally be the exact missing puzzle piece agents desperately need to finish tracking the drug supply chain. Please look deep into your heart and make the moral choice today. We have hit day 68 of this horrifying ordeal. This poor woman's internal implant captured every single flutter throughout those devastating 41 minutes of hell. It logged her sheer panic, her agonizing struggle, her forced relocation, and finally that terrifying chemical darkness right before the data link completely died at 2:28. An incredibly resilient muscle that pumped life through her veins for 84 long years became the ultimate silent witness to her assault. Better yet, federal investigators currently hold that undeniable biological diary safely in their possession. Forget about the bogus ransom letters, the completely drained cryptocurrency accounts, the media circus surrounding those leaked emails, and the endless barrage of internet hoaxes over the past 2 months. Absolutely none of that background garbage alters the cold, hard biological facts locked within those medical readouts. All the distractions in the world cannot magically wipe away the physical trauma her body endured that night. The proof is rock solid. The manhunt is burning hotter than ever. And that bulletproof medical timeline agents constructed over 68 grueling days of chart analysis remains an absolute unbreakable wall. Whoever orchestrated this nightmare will absolutely face justice for the horrors captured during those 41 minutes. Jump into the discussion section below and let me know your theories. Which specific aspect of this incredible biological tracking method truly blew your mind? Also, in case you missed our last deep dive titled Day 68, where a mysterious letter declares the victim deceased while simultaneously insisting she survives, you desperately need to catch up. I have placed a direct link to that wild episode right on your screen. Make sure you stream that one immediately afterward, since combining these two massive updates provides the ultimate roadmap of where this intense manhunt currently sits. Do not forget to hit subscribe for the channel and absolutely smash that notification bell so you never miss a breakthrough. In a world obsessed with what is visible, this story reminds us that the truth is often hidden in places no one thinks to look. A tiny device inside the human body, created to protect life, became a silent witness to fear struggle and the final unanswered moments of a person's disappearance. That alone teaches us something powerful. Technology is not just machinery. In the right hands, it can become a voice for the voiceless. But the deeper lesson is not only about science or investigation. It is about human dignity. Every heartbeat matters. Every life leaves a trace. Even when darkness tries to erase the evidence, truth has a way of surviving. It may rest in memory and data and compassion, or in the relentless efforts of people who refuse to give up. This is why society must value both innovation and humanity. We need technology that saves lives, and we need conscience strong enough to use it for justice. When people work with courage, intelligence, and empathy, even silence can speak. In the end, this story teaches us to protect life, respect truth, and never underestimate the power of hope in the face of fear.